Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. Today I would like to talk about something that I hate the most in chess. There are a few things I hate in chess actually, but this one is really gets me every time, and that is playing morning games. Well, what can I say? I'm a night owl, and in spite of playing so many tournaments throughout my career and so many last rounds played in the morning, I never really learned how to get accustomed to this change, and it has been something that has always been a problem for me, and it still is. Uh, Today, I think the situation is even worse because a lot of tournaments have double rounds, which means that you get to play morning games more than once, which in the past, when I was playing, normally wasn't the case. Normally, only the last round would be in the morning. Even some tournaments had last rounds in the afternoons, and those were my favorites, and where I usually played well. But nowadays, the situation is much worse, with even several double round days and many morning games, and that is one of the reasons why I don't play so much lately. It's very painful for me to think of all the rating, prize money, and nerves I have lost in these last rounds played in the morning. And today I would like to demonstrate one game. It's one of my last morning round games, to show you what it means when the head is not really working properly. So this one, let me shift to the board. This game was played last year at the Spanish Team Championship, and again it was played in the morning. And I was playing a young FIDE master from Portugal, what most disturbs me is in these last round morning games is the change of rhythm, because normally you play the previous day, you play in the afternoon, maybe you play a longer game, maybe you go for dinner or whatever it is, and you stay maybe late. And I, as a night owl, I like to prepare at night and then sleep longer in the morning. But now everything changes with the morning game, and I really don't know how to adjust. And what happened is that when I found out who I was playing, I checked his games, I prepared, and I saw that he played the Caro-Kann, and I prepared something against it. And well, I tried to go to sleep, but I couldn't, because I knew I had to get up in the morning. So I had a very bad night, barely sleeping. And then in the morning, of course, I was feeling very bad, probably worse than hungover. And well, I went to play the game, and let me show you what happened. So e4, c6, d4, d5. I prepared the exchange variation, ed5, cd5, bishop d3. This was last year, and in the meantime, I actually, for my Chessable course, 1e4 simplified, I actually discovered quite a few interesting ideas in the line knight f3 for white, followed by knight e5. And this is actually quite interesting. But back then, I just went for the more usual line, bishop d3. He went knight c6, c3, queen c7. This is what I expected. h3, knight f6, knight f3, g6, short castle, and bishop f5. And this was part of my preparation. However, here the first problem of the morning brain that refuses to work showed. The funny thing is that normally I don't have problems remembering my preparation, no longer how deep it goes, how complex the lines are. But here, even though I spent quite some time on this position the previous night, I could no longer remember what I was preparing. So I spent some time here trying to remember, and I remember that there were several moves that were okay. For example, I remember that the pawn sacrifice with knight e5 directly, giving up this pawn on e5, was also giving white some compensation, but I couldn't remember anything after it, even though I prepared it in quite some depth. So I also remember that there were some other moves that were okay, but I couldn't remember anything. So this was the first moment where I was getting pissed off at myself. So since I realized immediately that my brain is not working properly, I decided not to play this pawn sacrifice, which would require more effort from me. So I decided to play something simple. I played rook e1. But in fact, even though this is the most common move, most often played move in the position, this is not what I prepared. So you immediately see, even though I prepared and I prepared well, it all went to waste because I couldn't remember my preparation because my brain wasn't working. So rook e1, he took on d3, queen d3, bishop g7. And now we come to the second point when my brain inflicts serious damage on my prospect in this game. Here I thought for a while, and obviously I considered some moves. For example, I considered the move bishop g5, and this was better than the game choice. For example, short castle, knight bd2, let's say queen b6. Now a4 is good. He cannot take the pawn because of rook b1 traps the queen. Yeah. So this was something I considered. It was normal. Another move idea more like than a move was knight bd2. It's the idea of short castle, knight b3. A typical move in the Carlsbad structure. This is a reversed Carlsbad when the knight is actually controlling this c5 square and effectively prevents black from any minority attack. This was something else I considered. But I was tempted by one idea, and again, my morning brain sabotages me here. I went for something more forcing. So I went knight e5, and I will show you what I mean by my brain sabotaging me. I went for knight e5, and the next few moves were what I expected and what I calculated. So he goes short castle, I go bishop f4, he goes queen b6, attacking my pawn on b2. Yeah, I take knight c6. Yeah, so this was all part of what I intended when I was thinking over my 11th move, knight e5, bc6. And here, yeah, my intended move actually, when I was calculating knight e5, was to play b4. With the idea of knight d2, knight b3, then maybe knight c5, a4, a5, all nice and rosy. Yeah, I mean, I'm advancing on the queen side, very comfortable position. However, when I stopped in this position to consider b4, I realized that after a5, yeah, a move that I think I even considered, but only now I realized that after b8 takes a5, rook takes a5, knight d2, queen a7 is a strong move, defending the pawn on e7 and attacking my pawn on a2. And in fact, here black is better. And you can imagine my disappointment, my anger, my disillusion, yeah, when in this position, after having gone into this line with the idea of b4, I suddenly realized that that move that should justify my choice of knight e5 is actually a bad move and lands me in a worse position. Yeah? And this is quite typical of what happens when the brain is not working, or even sometimes when the player is not in good form. You embark on something thinking that something is good, but then what you think is good, you realize that for some tactical detail, in this case the move a5 and followed by queen a7, for some reason, well, it doesn't work. Yeah, and that means that your choice earlier, which was knight e5 in this game, was simply bad and landed you in some sort of trouble or inferior position. So here I was forced to adjust. Well, I realized that, okay, now I should be basically trying to make a draw because I'm just worse here, because I actually improved his structure with bc6, and he can further attack my center with c5. Yeah, maybe later also with e5, we will see. And I was feeling already kind of on the defensive here, which is, again, I say, this very disappointing. My good preparation went to waste. My calculation was bad. My evaluation was bad. So everything was bad. Nothing was working. Yeah, so you can imagine the frustration here. So, swallowing my pride, I went for the more modest b3. Now my idea is to maybe to push c4, c5, but of course he won't allow me to do that. He goes rook fe8, defending the pawn on e7. Yeah, I go knight d2, developing. Yeah, and now maybe the critical position in the game, because in this position I actually expected him to go knight d7, which is a preparation for both e5 and c5. Yeah. And now again you will see that my brain wasn't actually working so well. My intention was to go knight f3, stopping e5, and after c5, dc5, queen c5. I thought here I was worse. Yeah, this was my conclusion, that here I'm worse because it's the pressure along the long diagonal is unpleasant. C3 is hanging. However, had I continued, the line, for example, going just rook a d1, getting a rook away from the long diagonal, and now attacking obviously the pawn on d5, and after e6, c4 simply eliminates my weak pawn on c3. He can't take because the knight is hanging, and the position is actually quite equal. So again, you see how this time evaluation fails. I got to a position where I thought I was worse, but I did not continue. My intuition was also probably off, and instead of telling me that I should be okay there, I should just look harder, I just said, I'm worse here and I should do something else. But as you can see, objectively, I was wrong, and nothing was just bad, wrong conclusions. So somewhat fortunately for me, he didn't go for this, which I was worried about, even though, as we see objectively, I shouldn't have been, but he went for c5 immediately. But now after bishop e5, I was quite happy because with the bishop on e5, I neutralized his bishop on g7. I no longer have weaknesses on the long diagonal, and I was quite happy. But there is another interesting point to mention. I also briefly considered d takes c5, queen c5, and b4. But here I rejected this quite quickly, again, not delving deep enough into the position, because curiously enough, the computer here tiny bit prefers white. And the reason is that I still get my bishop to e5, let's say queen c6, bishop e5, and then I can continue with c4 as in the game, but in a more advantageous position, because now my pawns are somewhat further up the board. So, well, if I'm somehow allowed, I can maybe advance this queenside majority further. But again, you see my brain being off, my evaluation being off, my calculation being off, intuition also being off, so I couldn't make these decisions properly. But luckily enough, I was, decent enough, I could say, to make at least moves that kept me out of danger. So I went bishop e5, now he goes knight d7, and after this, the game quickly is simplified and heads for a draw. So bishop g7, king g7, dc5, queen c5, and c4. This is the saving move, getting rid of that weak pawn on c3, exchanging it for the pawn on d5, and just eliminating everything. So he goes rook a d8. Okay, d4 is bad because knight e4, queen e5, rook a d1, and I win the pawn on d4. So this is not very good. I actually saw this, so probably the first thing I managed to see properly. But see how late that is. I already messed up enough. So he went rook a d8, and now I exchange everything. Queen d5, cd5, knight b6, knight c4, knight d5, rook a d1, e6, and now rook d2. A prophylactic move, avoiding some knight c3 issues. Rook b8, knight e3, exchanging the knights, knight e3, rook e3, and okay, the game can be drawn at any point, but the tournament, there was this rule of no draw offers before move 30, so we played a few more moves. But this is good because there is one final moment I want to show you. So rook e7, rook c3, taking control of the open files, rook b5, king f1, rook e5, cutting off my king, preventing the centralization, rook d4, g5, and now h4. And this was the second good thing I managed to see in the game, because after gh4, it would not be very good to take immediately rook h4, because he can activate his rook with rook d7. And now all of a sudden some problems appear. But I managed to see that after gh4 I have check, rook g4 check, and when he moves the king, let's say on f8, then I take on h4 with tempo, forcing him to go back or defend the pawn, and then I can come back to d4 and prevent the activation of his rook. So this is the second good thing I saw in the game. But after he didn't take on h4, he went h6, I took on g5, offered the draw, and he accepted. So you can see a bad game. I mean, if you just saw this game without comments anywhere, you would just pass over it without ever even remembering anything about the game. But you see how many things happen in a game which is not in any way in any way characteristic or marked in any way. But you see in the underlying thoughts, especially when the player who played it explains it, that there are so many things happening. And unfortunately, this was a game that I'm, not very happy about. Probably the only thing I'm happy about is the result, not me not losing the game. But you see the problems that the player faces, for example, when his brain is not working. For me, I played pretty well in this tournament, but this, like I said, the last game is normally a disaster for me. And in this case, nothing much changed, okay, except for me not losing. But you see that how this no sleeping, the stress of the morning game, the change of the rhythm, everything affected me badly, and how my brain responded by refusing to work properly. So, I hope this was entertaining for you at least. Hope you maybe learned something. Maybe you can relate to some of these problems. Maybe not. Maybe you're happy to play in the mornings. But, I just wanted to share that, some players do suffer when they play morning games. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And, enjoy your summer. Hope it's not too hot as it is here, over 40 degrees centigrade. Well, cheers everybody. See you soon again.